Welcome back. You're not here for quick tips or empty cliches. You're here because you've outgrown the noise. Because something inside you knows the most unforgettable men are never the loudest in the room. This video won't waste your time with gimmicks. No pickup lines, no gift-giving tricks, no hollow strategies. What we're unlocking is something deeper, a shift so subtle, so stoic, yet so potent that it changes the way a woman sees you forever. Not because you tried to win her over, but because you showed her a man she couldn't predict and couldn't forget. So take a breath, let go of the noise, because what you're about to hear will silence every voice that ever told you to chase. Number 1. The silent act that reshapes her entire view of you. There's a moment in every man's evolution when he discovers the truth. Words can mislead, gifts can be dismissed, and even passion can die out. But presence that stays. And presence, real masculine presence, isn't something you perform, it's something you embody. Today, we're not teaching you how to impress her with grand gestures or poetic texts. You're about to learn something more primal and timeless, a single act of inner mastery that speaks louder than 1,000 compliments. This isn't a tactic, it's not manipulation. You're not pretending to be someone else to earn her affection. You're becoming so grounded in who you are that her world has no choice but to adjust to your energy. You stop seeking her approval and start radiating a presence she can't label, which means she can't forget it. In a world where everyone's talking, chasing, reacting, the man who remains still becomes a mystery. One moment changes everything. She expects a reaction, maybe sarcasm, distance, or a passive jab just to pull your strings. Most men would bite, they argue, they defend, they try to fix the discomfort, but not you. You don't flinch, you don't plead, you don't even explain. You let the moment breathe. And that calm, it unnerves her. Not because it's dismissive, but because it's unshakable. She doesn't understand it. She can't control it. And that's when the shift begins. She realizes she's no longer driving your emotional state. You've stepped outside the loop, and in doing so, you become something she didn't expect. Unreachable, irresistible, real. You've just stepped into the arena of emotional sovereignty. The Stoics, especially Epictetus, taught that freedom is found in self-restraint. You don't react, not out of fear, but out of freedom. Freedom from needing to be accepted, freedom from fearing her absence, freedom from being anyone but yourself. That silence, that non-reaction, it isn't weakness, it's precision, it's control, it's power, and suddenly, she's no longer evaluating you. She's chasing the answer to a question you never asked. Number 2, the quiet exit that echoes. Louder than any goodbye, there's a kind of silence that breaks through noise like thunder, and it doesn't come from retreat. It comes from self-respect. Once you've mastered the art of not reacting, you step into something greater. The silent withdrawal. It's the moment when her behavior turns into a test, when the connection starts to feel like a game, when her attention becomes unpredictable, her messages lack clarity, her presence feels more strategic than sincere. She wants you to question it. She wants you to feel unstable, to ask what's wrong, to beg for reassurance, but instead, you walk away, not angrily, not bitterly, but peacefully. No explanations, no exit speech, just distance. Why? Because your silence rewrites the script. In a world that expects men to plead for closure, your absence becomes deafening. It disrupts her illusion of control. She thought she could stir you, bend you, pull you, but now you're gone. And that absence, that's where the reflection begins. Most men try to fix the tension. They reach out. They try to prove themselves. And in doing so, they trade their dignity for a moment of relief. But the man who values peace over confusion, he steps back. He doesn't need to be in the room to command attention. He knows his energy doesn't belong where it's disrespected. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who caused the injury." And in relationships, that means this. You don't match her inconsistency. You don't explain your worth. You let your absence define it. Maybe she notices right away. Maybe she doesn't. But the echo of your silence? It lingers. Because a man who once gave his time and now gives only distance becomes unforgettable. She starts to question everything. Did I take him for granted? Why isn't he reaching out? Was he more valuable than I realized? You're no longer the man trying to be chosen. You're the man she has to understand. And that's the real shift. This isn't punishment. This isn't a strategy to win her back. This is about protecting your soul from environments that no longer honor your energy. Your silence isn't cold. It's sacred. It says, I don't belong in places where I'm only tolerated. I belong where I'm chosen. And if I'm not, then I choose myself. That's not detachment. That's masculine depth. And the beauty of it? If she comes back, she returns differently. If she doesn't, then your silence saved you years of noise, drama, and distraction. Number 3. The art of making her feel your absence. Without saying a word, we live in a world where speed is everything. Fast replies, instant answers, constant connection. But in that chaos, there's one thing that commands attention, a man who slows things down. You see, most men react the moment a woman reaches out. A message pings. He drops everything. A call comes in. He cancels his plans. Suddenly, his entire rhythm bends to her presence, and without realizing it, he becomes ordinary, predictable, convenient. But here's the truth most men never learn. When you're always available, you're rarely desired. Real masculine power comes not from how fast you respond, but from how steady you remain in your own pace. When you don't rush to reply, when you don't rearrange your life to prove your interest, you disrupt the pattern. And in that disruption, something begins to stir inside her. She starts asking questions. Why hasn't he replied yet? What is he doing right now? Why does his attention feel so rare, so valuable? That's not manipulation. That's energy. You're not withholding. You're prioritizing. You're showing her, without ever needing to explain, that your time is not cheap. Your attention is not on demand. You're not just accessible. You're intentional. This isn't about ignoring her. It's about introducing something she doesn't expect, a delay, a pause, a space. Because in that space, curiosity is born, and curiosity is the seed of desire. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, said it best. He who is everywhere is nowhere. If you're constantly available, emotionally and physically, you blend into the background, you lose your edge. But when you move with discipline, when your time has structure, she doesn't feel neglected, she feels magnetized. Suddenly she's checking her phone more often, replaying your last message, reading between the lines. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because your energy no longer revolves around hers. You've shifted the polarity. She's no longer the one evaluating if you're good enough for her world. She's wondering if she still has a place in yours. And here's the key. You don't delay to prove a point. You delay because you have a mission, whether it's your goals, your gym, your craft, your peace. You honor that before anything else. So when she reaches out, you don't ghost. You respond in your own time, measured, calm, direct, no excuses, no over-explaining, just clarity. Maybe it takes a few hours, maybe it's the next day. But that pause, it does more than words ever could. It tells her, this man doesn't need me to feel whole, but if he chooses me, it's real. And that choice, that slow, steady presence, it carries weight. She begins to see you not as a source of entertainment, but as a man who gives his presence with purpose. Not the one who's trying to win her over, but the one she now has to earn time with. And here's where everything changes. When a woman starts to value your absence, she starts to crave your presence. You're no longer reacting, you're leading. You're no longer one of many. You're the exception. Let her feel the stillness where your validation used to be. Let her wonder what it means when your attention doesn't arrive on cue. And when you do respond, do it with depth. Not as a man who was waiting for her message, but as a man who was busy becoming more of himself. Because real masculine energy isn't desperate. It doesn't chase. It doesn't perform. It holds its ground and lets her rise to meet it. Number 4. Draw her in, then let her go vertical bar, mastering the power of emotional restraint. There's a kind of connection that doesn't need to cling. A moment so subtle yet so profound, it leaves her thinking about you long after you've walked away. It happens in silence, in stillness, in the calm between the heartbeat and the goodbye. You pull her close, gently, fully. Then you let her go. Not because you're cold, not because you're playing a game, but because you've mastered something most men never even attempt: emotional restraint. You see, most men smother when they feel something real. They give and give until they lose themselves in the process. They overexpress. They overextend. They mistake intensity for intimacy. But real power, the kind that leaves a mark on her soul, comes from knowing when to stop. It's the moment you touch her hand and then let it fall away. The quiet pause after a long gaze before you shift your eyes. The soft kiss placed not in passion but in presence, followed by space. You don't do it to confuse her. You don't do it to impress. You do it because your center doesn't wobble, because your emotions don't dictate your direction. You feel, but you don't chase. You connect, but you don't cling. She feels that, and it stirs something ancient in her, something few men ever awaken. Because while the average man floods her with words and gestures, the rare man creates gravity through silence, through self-possession, through the paradox of presence without possession. And that paradox, it stays with her. As Carl Jung once said, the paradox is one of our most valued spiritual possessions. In this case, it's the paradox of deep connection without control, of closeness without dependency. That's what burns into her memory. Number 5. Say less, mean more. Vertical bar. The quiet power of a Stoic man. There's a certain kind of man who doesn't say much, but when he does, people listen. He's not loud. He doesn't dominate rooms. He doesn't try to outshine, outtalk, or over-explain. He just is. And that being speaks louder than words ever could. In the dating world, most men make the same mistake. They talk too much, trying to fill every silence, trying to explain every emotion, trying to convince her that they're worthy. But here's what the Stoic man knows. Every time you rush to speak, you risk weakening your presence. Every unnecessary word chips away at your mystique. Because the truth is, the man who can sit in silence, the man who isn't uncomfortable with the pause, that man commands the room without raising his voice. And that presence? It's magnetic to the feminine. Because where most men react, you observe. Where most men spill, you measure. Where most men seek connection through volume, you create it through vibe. A woman will test you with words, with moods, with silence of her own. Not to be cruel, but to feel you, to feel whether your center is solid or if you'll wobble the moment tension arises. That's why when she throws sarcasm or asks a loaded question or drops emotional bait, you don't need to answer everything. You don't need to fix it, explain it, or even meet it head on. You can just pause, look at her, smile softly, and let the silence do the heavy lifting. Because when you're rooted, when your self-worth isn't on trial, you realize that not every moment demands a reaction. Not every message needs a reply. Not every emotion needs to be solved. Sometimes your strength is shown in what you choose not to say. And here's what's powerful. When you don't overshare, you become intriguing. When you don't oversell, you become rare. When you speak less, but with clarity, calm, and conviction, you become unforgettable. Seneca wrote, "Speech is silver, but silence is golden." That's not just philosophy, it's a way of life, especially in love. Because when she's trying to pull you into drama, your silence becomes resistance. When she's used to men trying to win her over, your restraint becomes mystery. And when she's surrounded by noise, your calm becomes a refuge. This is what most men never grasp. You don't become powerful by being loud. You become powerful by being still. When you say less, every word begins to carry weight. When you don't chase attention, you become the one she pays attention to. And when your energy remains grounded no matter what she throws at you, she doesn't just notice, she remembers. Because masculine silence isn't passive, it's not weakness, it's not avoidance, it's controlled, it's intentional, it's leadership without ego. And that kind of silence is deafening. When a woman meets a man who doesn't scramble to explain himself, who doesn't defend every feeling, who doesn't perform just to be liked, she doesn't feel ignored, she feels seen. She feels the tension, and feminine energy craves that tension. It's not conflict, it's polarity, and it's what makes her lean in. So stop thinking you need to say more to prove you care. Stop thinking you need to be available, verbose, and expressive to win her over. Start valuing your silence. Start honoring your peace. Start letting her feel the man you are, rather than hearing the man you're pretending to be. Because the most powerful men don't speak to fill space. They speak to create space. And in that space, she finds herself drawn in, not to your voice, but to your presence.